following presentation is an Delmarva Studios production.
Welcome back, Truth Seekers. How have you been? Hope everybody had a great week. It's finally the weekend, and I hope everybody has a little downtime scheduled for this weekend. I know a lot of people around my neck of the woods here, excited for the Eagles football on Sunday, but I digress. I hope everybody's doing well. Before we kick off today's podcast, I did want to let everybody know we did have an interview scheduled with a listener last night, but work called. He had a late night, so we're going to go ahead and reschedule that. And when we do, we'll certainly let you know. So right now, it looks like the next interview I have lined up is February the 8th. That should be released with another listener. Again, I hope everybody's doing well. We have a couple of emails to discuss before we wrap up Eric Dubay's history of the flat earth. Hope you've enjoyed this series. And again, if you'd like to reach out to us like so many people have, and we're greatly appreciative for it, please reach out to us to our email address, which is theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. Again, that is theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. And if you forget, it's easy. Just go to the show's description. It's always in there. You can just copy and paste it. And I try to reply to everybody both in writing, well, not in writing, but in email. And I do read most of these on the air, unless people specifically ask, which some of them do, and that's completely fine. We're cool with that. So I look forward to hear from everybody. And I'd love to have more people on the program. Two things that really interest me is one is, people's awakening and how they came upon the flat earth. I reached out to someone today looking for an interview, and in my little bio, I talk about my awakening. 9/11 was very, very important to my awakening experience. I had been, at that point, 8 years of my military career as an engineer. So we worked in demolitions quite often. And what my eyes saw and what my training was all about, it did not add up. And I was also in an aviation unit at the time, and I jet fuel, JP8 aviation fuel. It doesn't burn hot enough to melt steel. None of it added up. But unfortunately, at the time, I'd spend the next 10 years either training or deployed. So I didn't really have a lot of time to sit down and research and get behind a microphone and podcast for sure. But post-retirement, I've dedicated a lot of my time to doing what I'm doing right now. And, flat earth is like getting hit over the head with a baseball bat. When you understand 9/11 and you finally come to the conclusion that you've been lied to about that, that's a kick in the behind, especially if you dedicated a lot of your time military like I did, and the lies of Iraq and Desert Storm, Vietnam, etc. But there was something different about flat earth, and I'm willing to bet a lot of you all too, because you really realize, my goodness, they are lying about everything. And when you take that pill, man, there's no going back. You never look at the world the same way again, do you? And I mentioned either in response to an email or on the podcast about how if you watch any Hollywood movies, you will always see a globe in the movie. And I had a listener email me saying, my goodness, now that you said that, I see in TV shows and movies, and even in the most unusual places where there shouldn't even be a globe. So, shout out to the controllers, to the hidden hand. They really do a heck of a job indoctrinating us to believe all the lies. But, I thought I was awake, really, when I, came to realize that 9/11 was a complete lie. And, but boy, when you come upon flat earth and finally realize there is no going back. And for me, I didn't get much sleep for 2 weeks. I mean, I just researched, consumed, and I would go out back and sit on the deck and stare and think and say, my goodness, I am X amount of years old. I've been lied to since a child because, what are the first two things you're taught as a child? Well, there's a guy in a red suit who gets on the behind reindeer and deliver billions of presents in 24 hours. And, we're on a spinning ball. Everybody has that dangling above their crib as a youngster with the earth, the moon, the sun. And they put the right when we're a child, they put the little projector isn't that interesting though? They put that projector with the stars, and that's really the sky clock. But we think it's that we're moving. But, I'm sitting here in my studio, looking at my window. It's about 45 degrees. I just got back from my walk. I walk by the lake every day, and it's perfectly still. And I got a lot of response from our last podcast. By the way, the show description, or just Google the Manitou Incline in Colorado Springs and look at the pictures. You can see forever, and there's no curvature. I saw that firsthand. But again, when I did that incline back in between 2004 and 2011, while I was living in Colorado, I wasn't hip to the lies at that point. But now in reflection, it makes all perfect sense. And I'm so glad that so many people are on board and researching this. I've gotten emails from people who are just starting their flat earth journey, some people who are still in between. And that's all good. We should question everything, and we should never, trust the science. We should continue to question everything. So there you go. I guess that's my opening volley for today's program. I'd like to start with a couple of emails first from Jessica. Jessica, thanks for reaching out. She says, good morning. I've been listening to your podcast and have enjoyed it very much. Thank you. As I was listening to the episode from last week, you mentioned you are a Sabbath keeper, and that I am. Saturday is the day of the Lord in our household, has been for several years, many years. And that's just me. I don't look down upon people who worship on Sunday. My best friend of 40 years is a Baptist guy, and he worships on Sunday and Wednesday. And it was funny. Back, on my other podcast, I talked about, they moved, I think it was Constantine in the 4th century. He was trying to please the Christians and the pagans. He made a lot of compromises, and I think that's when they originally moved the Sabbath to Sunday, and the sun worshipers were pleased with that. But then also a listener emailed me and said, well, Saturday is named after Saturnalia, and Saturn, and much of everything, how they've reorganized the calendar and how they named the moons, even look at the Apollo missions and Artemis, isn't Artemis like Apollo's brother? My bad. I paused and looked it up. I don't want to give you guys bad information. In Greek tradition, Artemis is the daughter of the sky god and king of gods Zeus, and the daughter of Creus and Phoebe Leto, and the twin sister of Apollo. So there you go. All of this stuff that NASA does is all about Greek mythology. So there you go. Let's get back to the email. I am a Sabbath keeper. Goes on to ask about the link, which we've talked about with paganism and the holidays, which I put in the last podcast, and I did email to her. And you can simply just go to your favorite search engine and just put paganism and Christian holidays, and you could research for days. But she asks if I was part of an organized denomination that keeps the Sabbath. And I'm not. I am kind of, I guess, currently looking for a church because I was listening. This is really from left field to right field, but I was listening to Joe Rogan podcast today, and the guy's name was Mike Glover, retired Spec Ops Green Beret guy, who is now a prepper. And there is something to, when you leave the military, there's a big void there as far as camaraderie And I've had a lot of issues with churches. The last time I was actually in a church, I think I mentioned this, and again, I'm sorry, I don't want to be that guy that repeats the same stories over and over. So if I've talked about this before, I apologize. Sometimes I don't remember if it was this podcast or another, but they had the offering halfway through the service, and the plates came up, and he's like, we can do better, and he passed them around again. And I grew up in the Methodist church, and the Methodist church has deteriorated and actually split within the last couple of years because they've embraced the LGBT and the drag queens. If you listen to my radio program during the summer, I did an entire series on the Methodist church, and specifically in Chicago, where they have drag queen church legitimately, and I played audio from it. It was very shocking. Woke a lot of people up to how much of the church has fallen. Pray, and it's biblical that was going to happen. Satan has infiltrated the church. That's a fact. Not every church, of course, but there's been, I think, 1,800, close to 2,000 of the 30,000 Methodist churches have split away to a different branch of the Methodist Church. I think it's called Global and Free. They're two different things now. But we have two Methodist church within probably a 15 or 20 mile radius from where I sit. And one of them is old school traditional, and the other one has the rainbow flag and the BLM flag hanging from their church legitimately. I'm not making that up. So if I could find one close by? Absolutely. One that keeps the Sabbath on Saturday, and that was more aligned. I do follow some folks on YouTube who are very much along the lines of my thinking and worship on Saturdays as well. So anyway, there you go. Thank you, Jessica, for the email. It was very kind of you to reach out. The next email, this is a very interesting one too, and I meant to prepare for this and I forgot about it, but I'm going to address it, and then on the next podcast we'll really get into it. But this is from MG. And he says he enjoys, well, I shouldn't say he or she, I don't know. But they said, I enjoy the healthy skepticism of reality, and it seems like you are open to reason. And then it says, could you make a Steelman argument for round Earth and a mainstream view of space? So, it's the opposite of a straw man. Could I make arguments for a round Earth and a mainstream view of space? Well, we've talked about we couldn't use curvature because we've proved that wrong. I guess the only thing that's really left in the hip pocket of globalists are the not globalists, but globers, I guess. I hope they're not globalists. Is the tides, right? That's one of the things that we're not really sure about, even though we don't think we're spinning and everything else, the moon. But I guess tides would be the Steelman argument for round Earth. The mainstream view of space is really silly, and it confounds me today as someone who's awake. Now, again, going back to my pre-Flat Earth days, I get it, but I guess you could talk post-1950s and, the Area 51 stuff, although I think many people understand now that was just the Foo Fighters that were taken from the Germans during World War II that were brought back to Area 51, and they were trying to do reverse engineering on it. But I don't really have a Steelman argument for mainstream view of space, except for maybe eclipses. But you heard us talk with Eric Dubé and his thoughts of it. But I guess that would be the two, if I had to make an argument for the globe. For the round Earth would be the tides, and for mainstream view of space, maybe the eclipses. So there you go. And if anybody wants to add to it, shoot us an email, the flatearthfiles@gmail.com. So thank you, MG, for reaching out. And I think that was it for today. No, I had one more. This is from Reverend Killjoy. Said, I wanted to say I'm new to your channel and following on Spotify. Thank you. And I think about 65% of our listenership comes from Spotify. Goes on to say, I'm not caught up yet, but thank you for the sources to further research on this topic. I found this topic as I was researching the lies of the Nephilim, and that is a very interesting subject, which I just really recently, within the last year, have started really deep diving into, and I've mentioned it a few times on my other podcast. Goes on to say, I ordered the 1892 map just to track the flight paths. And again, that is an eye-opener. Those 16 emergency landings, and then when you look at a flight path on how they present it real time on the globe, and then when you look at it on a flat earth map, it makes much, much more sense. Says, I was wondering two things. Have you done a lot on Nephilims, which I just mentioned? And then the other, have you seen the 900 million megapixel interactive camera on Google? Now, I did email him back, I think yesterday, asking for a link because I kind of tried to research it. I saw a few pictures, but not necessarily this. But he goes on to say, you can zoom out so far, well beyond the visual of the curvature of the earth. So there you go. He also asked, is there any other platforms we are on in case I get shut down on Spotify? And I am. The Flat Earth Files are on all major podcast distributors: iHeart, Spreaker, iTunes, Amazon, and of course Spotify. If we continue success with this, I'll probably do the same. I'll start a website. I'll put a chat room in there where people can interact and like-minded people can, chat with each other. So that's something, if things slow down a little bit, I'll do. It's not super expensive. So there you go. Thank you, Reverend Killjoy. Appreciate all the emails. Keep them coming. I love to hear from everyone around the world. So there you go. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and wrap up Eric Dubay's history of the flat earth. We left off last time talking about much of the failures of folks trying to prove the globe in the late 1800s. And we basically are now in the early to mid 20th century. And by the 1930s, an eccentric Christian flat earther named Wilbur Green Voliva was attracting widespread publicity around the world thanks to his American lecture tours and daily radio broadcasts from his personal station, which could be heard all the way to Australia. Voliva famously founded and built Zion City in Illinois, which is a town of about 6,500 people, and I shouldn't say each and every one, but for the most part, all of whom were Christians and flat earthers. Zion City even had its own schools and churches which taught flat earth cosmology, and that's very interesting because one of our listeners, we've been going back and forth having a conversation, of course, with Homeschooling Mama, talking about how awesome would it be if we could find some type of curriculum that offered the flat earth cosmology. In the spirit of Robotham and Hampton, throughout his life, Voliva offered an open-ended wager of $5,000. And again, this is in the 30s. $5,000 was nothing to sneeze at. He would offer $5,000 to anyone who thought they could disprove the flat earth. Until his death in 1942, there were no takers. Of course, after the Second World War, Operation Paperclip brought hundreds of top German rocket scientists and physicists into the United States, and beginning in the late 50s, employed them in NASA, which I call not a space agency or never a straight answer, but it is known as the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Meanwhile, the Russian space program was also forming a so-called space race between America and Russia ensued. Now, the geostationary communications satellite was first imagined in 1945, which was a proposal by Freemason science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke, and supposedly became science fact just over a decade later. In 1957, Russia allegedly launched the first satellite named Sputnik into low Earth orbit, followed in 1958 by America's Explorer 1. Nowadays, there are supposedly upwards of 20,000 such satellites constantly orbiting the Earth. They are allegedly floating around in the thermosphere, where temperatures are claimed to be upwards of 4,530 degrees Fahrenheit. The metals used in satellites, however, such as aluminum, gold, and titanium, have melting points of 1,200, 1,900, and 3,000 degrees, respectively, all far lower than they could possibly handle. People often even claim to see satellites with their naked eyes, but this is ridiculous considering they are smaller than a bus and allegedly over 100 miles away. It is impossible to see anything so small that far away. Using even telescopes, no one claims to discern the shape of satellites, but rather describes seeing passing moving lights, which could easily be any number of things, from airplanes to drones to shooting stars or other unidentified flying objects. The fact that they are geostationary means they would not appear to move through the sky anyway, but rather be perpetually stuck in the exact same place every day. But what about satellite phones, you say? Well, so-called satellite phones have been found to have reception problems in countries like Kazakhstan, which, by the way, Kazakhstan happened to have very few cell phone towers. If the Earth were a ball with 20,000 satellites surrounding, such blackouts could not regularly occur in any rural countryside and deep ocean area. Also, satellite TV dishes, which again existed for years before satellites were supposedly invented, are almost always positioned at a 45-degree angle towards the nearest ground-based repeater tower. And that's about right. If I recall, I'd mentioned in a previous podcast, we had the Bluebird satellites in the Middle East. I think they were, we had them at a 42 or 43 degree angle or so. And of course, they had to face a certain angle. Now, if TV antenna were actually picking up signals from satellites 100 miles away in space, most TV dishes would be pointing more or less straight up into the sky. And the fact that satellite dishes are never pointing straight up and almost always positioned at a 45-degree angle also prove that they're picking up ground-based tower signals. Before satellites, radio, television, and navigation systems like LORAN and Decca were already well established and worked fine using only ground-based technologies. I had mentioned before driving through the mountains of West Virginia and losing my XM radio, whatever it was, 15, 20 years ago. Theoretically, I was higher in the sky, so it was satellite. Why would I? Theoretically, I was closer to the satellite. I shouldn't have lost signal. Nowadays, huge fiber optic cables connect the internet across oceans. Gigantic cell towers triangulate GPS signals. That's how that works. And ionospheric propagation allows radio waves to be bounced, all without the aid of science fiction bestsellers known as satellites. And again, a lot of people think that the firmament has a lot to do with the radio waves as well, being able to travel so far. In the late 50s, a sign maker from Dover, England, named Samuel Shenton, in the spirit of Robotham and Lady Blount's Zetetic Society, created IFERS, the International Flat Earth Research Society, and began giving lectures on televisions and in newspapers to youth clubs and schools about our flat, motionless Earth. So again, when your buddy who laughs at you and calls you a tinfoil hat wearing fool and tries to tell you that the CIA came up with flat Earth in 2014 to get you to look dumb, well, you can pull out the book from the 1800s. You can talk about IFERS, on and on and on. This has been around forever. So don't let them try to talk down to you or discredit you. Shenton discovered the writings of the late 19th century flat earth authors mentioned previously, William Carper, which we talked about, right? Made it his mission to spread the Zetetic message as far and wide as he could. With NASA's supposed satellite launches happening, people constantly questioned Shenton about satellites proving the globe Earth, to which he would always reply, quote, "Does sailing around the Isle of Wight prove to be spherical?" Of course not. When NASA claimed to have put the first man in space, Shenton said from the beginning that it was all photo and video trickery. When John Glenn supposedly orbited the world in 1963, Shenton even sent him a free IFERS membership with a personal message that said, "Okay, wise guy." These people know that just about all the anybody who gets to any high level in NASA is a Freemason, and they know the consequences if you come out and speak the truth. They won't just kill you, they'll kill your entire family. If you don't believe me, go look at the gentleman who investigated Gus Grissom's death. They didn't kill him, just him. They killed him, his wife, and his stepdaughter. You see, his car just happened to break down on train tracks. Happens all the time. "Oh no, honey, our car broke down on the train tracks. What should we do?" "I don't know, honey. The train is getting closer. What do you think?" "Gee, maybe I'll try starting it again." "Oh no, it's still not start." I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like the fact, the chances of getting hit by a train on the train tracks are 1 in a trillion. Like every now and then, maybe the alarm doesn't go off, the arm doesn't come down, and maybe you get hit by a moving train, but for your car to break down on the train tracks and get just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And you can bet those people were dead before the train ever hit the car. But again, Shenton knew that John Glenn, two-time U.S. Senator and one of NASA's first astronauts, was a lying Freemason, just like his heliocentric forefathers from Pythagoras to Copernicus, from Kepler to Cavendish, along with most all of NASA's astronauts. Buzz Aldrin Jr., an admitted ring-wearing, hand-sign-flashing 33rd degree Freemason from Montclair Lodge, number 144 in New Jersey. Edgar Mitchell is an Order of Demolay Mason at Artesta Lodge, number 29 in New Mexico. James Erdwin, Tejon Lodge, Colorado Springs. All of them, on and on. I'm not going to read the entire list. But yep, Alan Shepard, Neil Armstrong, all of them. Not only themselves, but had fathers who were Freemasons as well. They were all part of the club. Like George Carlin said, right? There's a club at the top and you ain't in it. You're not kidding. The amount of astronauts known to be Freemasons or from Freemasonic families is absolutely astonishing. Now, it's likely that more astronauts and people of key importance in NASA are affiliated with the Brotherhood as well, but they're not so open about their membership. For there to be this many Masons, members of the world's largest and oldest secret society, involved with the promotion and the propagation of this globalist heliocentric doctrine from its outset to modern times, should raise some serious suspicion. Before the first Apollo mission ever even cleared the launch pad, 11 astronauts died in highly suspicious accidents. Gus Grissom, we just mentioned, Roger Chaffee, Ed White, were all cremated together in an Apollo capsule during a fire that was completely unnecessary, and it was an extremely dangerous test where they were strapped down, locked into a 100% oxygen chamber, which incinerated them in seconds. 7 other astronauts, Ted Freeman, Charles Bassett, Elliot See., Russell Rogers, Clifton Williams, Michael Adams, and Robert Lawrence, died in 6 separate airplane crashes, and Ed Givens in a car crash. 8 of these deaths were 1967 alone. So Many astronauts are coincidentally dying under such circumstances is extremely unlikely. And again, it lends credence to the idea that these were intentional hits by the Masons trying to find the right people to sell their hoax. And if you didn't want to go along with it, well, you had an accident. And of course, one of the most outspoken of those fallen astronauts was indeed Gus Grissom. By 1967, he'd become increasingly irritated and vocally negative about NASA's chances of ever putting a man on the moon. He stated that the odds were pretty slim, and of course, the one action that did him in was when he famously hung a huge lemon on the Apollo capsule after it repeatedly failed safety testing procedures. Grissom threatened to go public with his complaints about it, and even told his wife Betty, quote, "If there is ever a serious accident in the space program, it's likely to be me." And something that a lot of people don't know is right after his murder, which is the correct wording, murder, government agents raided his house before anyone had been informed about the fire or his death. That is the United States government for you. Imagine that. Right after his murder, before anyone had been informed about the fire or his death. They removed all his personal paper, they removed his diary, and was never returned. From 1969 to 1972, the Freemasons at NASA claimed to have landed 6 of their Apollo missions on the moon. With this ingenious deception, a bit of rocket technology, a bunch of lying Freemasons, and photographs taken through a round window, with this one psyop, NASA managed to convince nearly everyone on Earth that they live on a spinning ball. However, in the documentary, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, you can watch official leaked NASA footage showing Apollo 11 astronauts Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins for almost an hour using their transparencies and camera tricks to fake shots of around Earth. They communicate over audio with Control in Houston about how to accurately stage the shot. And someone keeps prompting them on how to effectively manipulate the camera to achieve the desired effect. First, they blacked out all of the windows except for one that was downward facing and circular, which they aimed the camera toward from several feet away. So that created the illusion of a ball-shaped Earth that was surrounded by the blackness of space, when in fact it was simply a round window with their dark cabin. Neil Armstrong claimed at this point to be 130,000 miles from Earth, halfway to the moon. But when the camera tricks were finished, the viewers could see for themselves the astronauts were not more than a couple of dozen miles above the Earth's surface, flying in a high-altitude plane. And by the way, I will put the link to A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon in the show description. If you've never seen that, you can check it out. Lots of that's the famous shot of them in there taking the pictures when they're really just above the clouds, but it makes it look like they're from outer space, the way they manipulate the camera. But since the original so-called blue marble image, NASA has provided the public with many more pictures and videos showing the globe Earth, touting veritable photographic proof that Pythagoras' 2,500-year-old theory was finally validated. When seen with a skeptical eye, however, professional photo analysts have dissected several NASA images of the ball Earth and found undeniable proof of computer editing, obviously CGI. For example, images of the Earth allegedly taken from the moon have proven to be copy and pasted in as evidence by rectangular cuts found in the black background around the Earth simply by adjusting brightness and contrast levels. So if they were truly on the moon and the Earth was truly a ball, there would be no need to fake such pictures. By the way, that movie, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, was directed by Bart Sibrel, who I will be interviewing here, hopefully the middle of February. He should be getting back to me today or tomorrow. But back to this. When NASA's images of the ball Earth are compared with one another, the coloration of the land and oceans are relative. The size of the continents are consistently so drastically different from one another as to prove beyond any reasonable doubt that the pictures are all fake. NASA has many alleged photographs of the ball Earth which show several exact copy and pasted cloud patterns. For an agency that is allocated $70 million a day, they are extremely lazy when they make these depictions of the Earth. The cheesy graphics and their artists have even placed things like faces and dragons and even the word sex into cloud patterns over various ball Earth pictures. One recent Pluto picture clearly has a picture of Disney's Pluto the dog layered into the background. It is simply more Freemasonic mockery is all it is. On a clear afternoon during a waxing or waning moon cycle, it is possible to see the blue sky right through the moon. Right? For centuries, stars and planets have often been seen and recorded even by the Royal Astronomy Society to have been seen through the moon. And again, if the Earth is a solid planet, that should not be possible. But we see it time and time again. And again, that's it peeking through the firmament, right? Samuel Shenton, president of IFERS, was quoted before the supposed Apollo moon landing, stating that, quote, "Stars have been seen through the moon. The astronauts had better be ready to come right back because there isn't anything to land on." Right? There you go. Because it's like plasma. It's not an actual planet. Besides Shenton, many of the first people to unequivocally call out the NASA moon landings as being a staged hoax were professional photographers. When the official NASA photographs of the moon are closely examined, it is clear that many were taken inside a studio using repetitive backgrounds with artificial lighting, wires, and even cranes. David Percy, who was an award-winning British photographer, photo analyst and historian Jack White, Nexus magazine publisher Marcus Allen, and many others all put their professional reputations on the line to expose NASA's so-called photographic evidence. And we know when you go against the machine, you are putting your livelihood on the line. And these people, they stood up for it. So bravo to them. None of the Apollo missions brought any extra studio lighting with them on the lunar lander. So the sun should be the only light source on the moon and in all pictures taken there. In that case, the light should only come from one direction and all shadows should never be The light should only come from one direction, right? And all shadows should be cast in the opposite direction of the light. However, in dozens of official NASA photos, there are shadows being cast up in three directions simultaneously, often at up to 90-degree angles, which can only be the result of multiple light sources not present on the moon. Several pictures even show overhead spotlights reflecting in astronauts' helmets and multiple lens flares originating from two or more light sources. Analyzing several images from the 6 missions show repeated background features, the exact same hills, dunes, and craters being used over and over again in supposedly different places on the moon, as well as visible foreground and background lines indicative of a studio set. Now, in images from Apollo 11, Buzz Aldrin, right, the guy who refused to put his hand on the Bible and swear that he went to the moon. And of course, not only that, in an interview, he straight up said that we didn't go to the moon. It didn't happen that way. Actually, let's listen to the audio.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen, so in the future, if we want to keep doing something, we need to know why something stopped in the past that we wanted to keep it going.
A little bit of guilt there. He just came out and said it, and of course, people ran to his defense. But his response, give it all away. We didn't go there. That's the way it happened. You can see it in his eye. It's one thing to sit in front of a camera of adults and lie to them, but man, when you're sitting in front of an 8-year-old child, maybe just maybe he had an inkling of humanity in him. He came out and said, you know what, the burden. You look at Neil Armstrong, which, by the way, Neil A. Armstrong, Neil A. backwards is alien, just another Freemasonic hoax and mockery of us. But that guy, again, I've said this a million times, Michael Jordan won basketball trophies. Great basketball player, right? I'm not undermining him whatsoever, but I'm saying when you put a great basketball player versus someone who went to the moon, if Michael Jordan was at every Gatorade commercial and had sneakers named after him, you would think, boy, if I went to the moon, you'd have Neil Armstrong sneakers. You could jump higher and right. Just think of the commercials you could make, right? Running on the moon, real slow motion. Man, I would just they didn't know. They just disappeared. And old Neil, from what I've heard, it was just basically locked himself away and drank all day, drank a lot because he couldn't handle the guilt of knowing that he lied. I mean, it's one thing, we've all lied in our lives, specifically or especially when you're younger, right? Where were you last night? Right? And come up with they call them white lie, but a lie's a lie. I don't like to use the term white lie. A lie is a lie. But my goodness, lying to generations, right? You lie to billions of people. Think of the weight you have to carry lying to billions of people. Knowing in the back of your mind that you're an absolute fraud, that you're in every history book around the world as being the first person to walk on the moon, knowing it's a dang lie. Imagine the burden. And I'm not saying feel sorry for him. He accepted that role, right? So, I'd like to hear your thoughts on all that. Could you imagine? At what point did he find out? What are you going to do if you genuinely think you're going to the moon and at the last minute, what was the movie from the 70s when they were going to go to Mars? And at the last minute, they say, guys, get out, come on. And O.J. Simpson's in it. And I think that kind of might be similar to what really went down. Because listen, if they tell you they're going to kill your family, it's difficult to put anybody in that particular situation. I'm not saying if he's a Freemason, he obviously isn't like a second or third level Freemason like we hear today, like your neighbor's a Freemason and he goes and raises money. We're talking about 32nd and 33rd degree Freemasons who are the illuminated ones and they know what's going on. So I don't know. I'd love to hear where you stand on where you thought, on when do you think they knew this was from the get-go, at the last minute? But again, go back to that 1978 movie, Capricorn 1. If you've never seen it, it's like on every streaming service for free. You can go check it out. It's interesting. All right. Where were we? Buzz Aldrin can be seen wearing different colored gloves, different length boots, and pictures that were supposedly taken within minutes of each other. Did he go back to the ship and change out shoes? If Buzz was really in the vacuum of space in a pressurized spacesuit, he certainly would have not had the time or reason to depressurize and repressurize his suit just to make such fashion adjustments. And some pictures show the lunar rover with no tracks anywhere around it. Others show rover tracks all over the foreground while it is yet to be unpacked and unloaded. A couple of pictures even show that appear to be sneakers and a lady's heel that was on the moon in addition to the astronaut's blue boot print. So maybe one of the ladies on the set had to make a last-minute adjustment, ran out, and they forgot to, when you go golfing and you're in the sand traps, you got to rake it out. Maybe someone forgot to get the rake. And another glaring mistake that is none of NASA's images or videos show stars in the background, as they should, just complete blackness. Likely because exact star maps, as they should appear from the moon, would be extremely impossible to fake correctly without getting any, without somebody actually catching on with it. So there you go. But one thing was odd, obviously, was the testimony of different astronauts on different missions. And their autobiographies, so of course they made money off their lies, and interviews just muddies the waters even more. Some of them bragged about seeing the astonishing, brilliant light of the stars. Then you had others that said, I don't remember seeing any stars at all. So again, all these inconsistencies in the fact that none of NASA's moon pictures feature stars, planets in their appropriate positions. Right? That should raise a red flag that these astronauts were not on the moon. Many pictures of the sun on the moon are clearly spotlights and not the sun. There's a very obvious picture of the Apollo 11, the lunar lander, and then there's supposedly the sun in front of it, and then the shadow goes off to the left. It's pretty funny. And by the way, that sun is obviously a studio light, nothing more and nothing less. And one image clearly shows a shadow on the ceiling of the space, I should say, as the lunar lander lifts off. And everybody always asks, by the way, who filmed the lunar lander taking straight off? We had technology back in the day where we could record, we could control cameras from the moon. Really? Seriously? The technology they had was about as powerful as the Atari 2600 chip. That's what they went to the moon with. Many images show shadows of reticule crosshairs suspended in air over a print underneath, proving them to be doctored, not originals. Images of the lunar lander supposedly on the moon shows a pathetic 1969 attempt at creating this high-tech, futuristic-looking equipment using what really appears, when you look closely, to simply be construction paper, gold foil, scotch tape, and even shower rods in some cases. The idea that piece of junk that is shown in these official NASA photographs that flew to the moon and back it's ludicrous. It's just laughable, guys. Close-ups of the lunar lander footpads show them without a speck of dust, without a burnt print under its 10,000-pound thrusters, like it was just gently set down in place. NASA scientists in their own documents were worried about the LEM falling into its own massive burn radius, yet there it sits with no burn print and spotless, clean pads. Even the astronauts' boot prints made deep impressions in the moon dust, Yet the lander's 10,000-pound thrusters left not a trace, no blast, no hole, no dust on the pads. And I'm here to tell you it would have. There were very, especially Nasiriyah in Iraq, had that type of dust, a moon dust. Like when you walk, it was like walking in talcum powder. That's the best way to describe it. And when that thing went up, you should have seen nothing. You understand? When those thrusters went off, the famous picture of it taking back off, it should have been nothing. It should have been nothing but dust. Do you remember the video from Apollo 17? Oh my goodness. It is simply a model, like sparks from a sparkler. Remember when you were a kid, you had the sparklers, maybe on your birthday cakes at the restaurant, they put the sparklers on. I'm going to include this video and to listen to what they say. I wish you could see it. This little model, and you see sparks fly off.
99, proceeded, 3, 2, 1.
There's sparklers.
Right away, Houston.
No dust coming
good.
up. It's just floating into the air. It is the cheesiest. Oh, it is awful. No dust. These thrusters was supposedly all these thousands of pounds. Nothing. You would have not seen anything. The dust would have been so... Anybody who's been to a desert region before understands that any type of wind or thrust like that, it would have blinded the camera. And again, who's controlling this camera that is watching this? How do we not... What took us so long to deduce all this mess? When we look back now, this is absolute garbage, right? Why can't we get our neighbors, our friends, and our family members to sit down and watch this and deduce for themselves that if they're lying about man's greatest accomplishment, could you at least consider that maybe we aren't on a spinning ball hurling through space at 66,600 miles an hour, that we're not on a 23.4 degree axis, which when you subtract it from a 90 degree right angle, just comes out to be 66.6 degrees. All of the lies, all the Freemasonic lies from Neil A., Alien, the wink wink. By the way, they have their stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. These actors, these astronauts, this is a lie. The Bible tells us so. Here on earth, everything is a lie. You are lied to every single day. You are lied to that if you don't succumb and bend your knee at the altar of Pfizer, that this little invisible germ is going to find you and it's going to kill you. We were told in the end of 2021 by the President of the United States that if you didn't get vaccinated, you were going to die. I'm not lying. He said that it was going to be a winter of death for the unvaccinated. Now you've got the lie is exposed and people are waking up. There's a lot of vaccine regret out there. But this is the Flat Earth Podcast. Let's kind of back off there. I'm not trying to start another argument amongst people who may have, fallen into that lie. Okay, let's go ahead and start to wrap this up a little bit. We got about 5 minutes left. But in 1970, Freemason and philosophy professor at St. Thomas University, Leo Ferrari, created the Flat Earth Society of Canada, which he would soon shorten to simply the Flat Earth Society. Now, here's the thing. Unlike Samuel Shenton's International Flat Earth Research Society, IFRS, Ferrari treated it like a deadpan joke. So like their explanation, like if you go to the Flat Earth Society's webpage, again, it's a lot of truth mixed with lies. Like they think we're on a pancake that is constantly going up in the air, and that's the gravity. It's a mockery, and they create, it's obviously controlled, right? Opposition controlled, and they make a mockery of it, even creating very many intentionally false flat earth arguments. For example, Leo Ferrari would always bring a pumpkin-sized rock with him during interviews and lectures, claiming he brought the stone back from the edge of our flat earth. Of course, he would say it with a huge smirk on his face, how his boat had fallen over the edge of the earth, but he was luckily saved by hanging onto this rock. It's clearly treating our flat earth in this tongue-in-cheek way to discourage people from taking the matter seriously. And that's when Obama made his famous speeches in, was it 2012? He didn't say the flat earth. I don't have time for flat earthers. No. He said, I don't have time for people in the flat earth society, which people would immediately Google the flat earth society and see the ridiculous preponderances that are put out there. And again, there's some truth. There's some people like within the chat rooms on there that are kind of on it, but then you see some ridiculous suspicions they have. It's obviously controlled opposition. 1971, Samuel Shenton passed away, and the American former airplane mechanic Charles K. Johnson took his place as president of IFERS. Charles and his wife Marjorie, like Lady Blount, and many of the original Zetetic Society members were not only flat earthers, but outspoken vegetarians and anti-visionists. Charles and Marjorie maintained a periodical called The Flat Earth News for many years, where they printed articles about NASA's lies, geocentricity, the flat earth, and vegetarianism. Unlike Leo Ferrari and his mock society spreading disinformation, Charles Johnson was a genuine voice speaking out against the evils of the world. Apparently finished with their moon landing propaganda. Starting in 1976, NASA began faking Mars landings instead. Right? And again, planets used to be called wandering stars, not these terrestrial Earth-like habitations capable of landing anything on, right? The sun, the moon, and stars are simply luminaries, celestial lights that are relatively close to the Earth, not something tangibly solid that humans could ever walk on, or my goodness, how everybody's hero Elon Musk can habitate, right? And again, guys, Elon Musk is just another actor on the world stage. This is painfully obvious to anyone with a functioning eyeball and a telescope or Nikon P900 camera, but NASA continues to this day to publish thousands of fake CGI images claiming to come from Mars. Even assuming Mars was an actual spherical desert planet, as NASA claims, it's impossible for them to have safely landed the probes based on their own trials and statistics. To this day, NASA continues to fake Mars landings, and more government space agencies around the world, including Russia, China, Japan, France, India, and others, are following the exact Freemasonic model. When they say, why would they do that? They're able to fleece their populations of taxpayer money to fund programs that provide nothing but propaganda. Then you fast forward to 1998, NASA claimed to have sent up the first piece of the ISS. But they've been caught time and time again with air bubbles forming and floating off in their official outer space footage. Astronauts have also been seen using scuba gear, kicking their legs to move. By the way, Luca Parmitano, remember, he almost drowned when water started filling up in his helmet while allegedly on a spacewalk. It's admitted that astronauts train for their spacewalks in underwater training facilities like NASA's Neutral Buoyancy Lab. But what is obvious from their space bubbles, and they're under tons and tons of blunders, just go to YouTube and put NASA fails and enjoy the rest of your evening. You can watch hours of it. All the official spacewalk footage is fake and filmed underwater or in front of a green screen, right? In 2009, after watching Alex Jones interview and praise several NASA astronauts on his own show, I wrote an article and sent a message to him and his producers about the moon landing hoax, and included a link to Samuel Robothon's Flat Earth book for them to read. Alex even mentioned this on air the next day and called Eric Dubay a flat earther who thinks he's covering up some Atlantean conspiracy. So again, many people believe Alex is controlled as well. He wears NASA shirts, and I think the reason why he got all involved in this recent thing with the school in Connecticut was, again, to get you to stop questioning things because you may get sued. But shout off to Eric Dubay and many other people who are spearheading the Flat Earth movement. Right? There are a lot of people who are searching for the truth, more genuine flat earthers, not people who are controlled opposition like the frauds over at the International Flat Earth Society, I should say, right? So there you go. I appreciate everyone tuning in. I think, let me check the emails one more time to make sure I didn't miss anything. I did have one that just came through. I don't think I addressed this one in the beginning. It's from Daniel. He says he's been enjoying the Flat Earth podcast. He woke up to Flat Earth in 2016. It was dramatically eye-opening, to say the least. Over the past 30 years, I've been investigating conspiracy theories from the moon hoax to 9/11 to vaccines. The moon hoax, obviously, as technology arises and we have the ability to look at these things, I think it goes without saying we never went to the moon, 100%. 9/11, we all know, was orchestrated. People knew about it. There's a lot of argument how it went down. And then, of course, vaccines. For me, Eustace Mullins' Murder by Injection is a book that really changed. I just thought there was good vaccines and bad vaccines, and then my eyes were open. Again, this is just my opinion, folks. Daniel says it's a dark world ruled by the evil one. The only hope we have is in Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world. He says he loves talking about this topic because it will lead directly to God, the Creator. During the past 3 years, this COVID outbreak has negatively affected my occupation. Similar to my wife, refused the jab, lost the job. But it's a very, very nice email. It says many people came to know Christ because of this. Obviously, I've said this before. I think the Illuminati, the Freemasons, the Hidden Hand, they overplayed their cards. This COVID thing really woke a lot of people up. It really did. And I have proof of it right now because I see the numbers for a Flat Earth podcast, which I wanted to do on the side, and I figured we'd have a few listeners, and the listenership has exploded. So there's a lot of people out there. And by the way, and agreed, the one thing we have is the Flat Earth proves the Creator. That is the biggest reason why they hide it. Flat Earth proves there was a Creator. It proves that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, not billions of years old. There's a story of this green meteor coming by, and it only comes around, they say it comes around every 50,000 years. That's impossible. Our Earth is only about 6,000 years old. So again, more lies, and people are eating this stuff up. They are just eating it up. By the way, Daniel has a YouTube channel. I'll put that in the show description as well. So if anybody would like to check it out, it's got some pretty interesting videos on there. So I hope you take the time to check them out as well. Thank you, Daniel. And I think that's a wrap for today. I think we're just over an hour. And again, thanks to Eric Dubay for some great content. We have more interviews coming, lots to talk about, and I hope we get a lot more emails to share with the others, and I hope we get people who would like to come on the air and share their, not just their Flat Earth opinions, but their awakening experience. And it's great to hear from people all around the world. It's really awesome. So, hey, everybody have a nice weekend. Be safe, all right? Take care of one another. If you need anything, again, one last time, theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. Check out all the information I put in the show description. I'll have a few videos in there. I'll have Daniel's link and maybe a few surprises. So everyone have just a tremendous weekend. Take care of one another. God bless. Keep your head on a swivel. Until next time, my friends. We'll see you.
You're listening to the Fact Hunter Radio Network.
Just the facts, ma'am.
Hey, hon, we really need new phones.
T-Mobile will cover the cost of 4 amazing new iPhone 15s, and each line is only $25 a month.
New iPhone 15s? Best new year ever.
Get 4 iPhone 15s on us with eligible trade-in when you switch to T-Mobile. Minimum of 4 lines for $25 per line per month with autopay discount using debit or bank account. $5 more per line without autopay, plus taxes and fees. Phone fee at 24 monthly bill credits for well-qualified customers. Contact us before canceling account to continue bill credits or credit stop and balance on required finance agreement due. $35 per line connection charge applies. See T-Mobile.com.
Hey, hon, we really need new phones.
T-Mobile will cover the cost of 4 amazing new iPhone 15s, and each line is only $25 a month.
New iPhone 15s? Best new year ever.
Get 4 iPhone 15s on us with eligible trade-in when you switch to T-Mobile. Minimum of 4 lines for $25 per line per month with autopay discount using debit or bank account. $5 more per line without autopay, plus taxes and fees. Phone fee at 24 monthly bill credits for well-qualified customers. Contact us before canceling account to continue bill credits or credit stop and balance on required finance agreement due. $35 per line connection charge applies. See T-Mobile.com.